The alien girl reunites with the human soldier who saved her years before. The war was finally over. Across the galaxy, planets that had known only fire and fear were now silent. Cities lay in ruins, fleets drifted aimlessly in space, and the cries of survivors echoed in the emptiness. Captain Elias Ward had seen enough death to last a lifetime. He had fought bravely for humanity, for the United Earth Alliance, but the victory felt hollow. So many lives lost, so many worlds scarred, and yet the war's shadow lingered over everything. Elias stood on the observation deck of the transport ship Aegis, staring at the fading glow of a distant battlefield. Smoke still rose from a broken space station that had once commanded a major sector. He clenched his fists and remembered the soldiers who had died beside him. He had promised them peace, but peace felt distant, almost impossible in the wake of the war. It was then that the official notice arrived. A message from the Alliance High Command, formal and impersonal, floated across his screen. Captain Elias Ward, in recognition of your service during the Galactic War, you are awarded an inheritance from the assets of the fallen Vortani Empire. Details enclosed. Elias raised an eyebrow. Inheritance, he muttered, tapping the screen. The Vortani Empire had been one of the fiercest enemies humanity had ever faced. To inherit anything from them felt strange. He opened the file. A holographic image flickered to life, revealing a figure he had only seen in reports. An alien female, her skin shimmering in subtle tones of blue and violet, eyes bright like polished gemstones. Her posture was straight, disciplined, and there was a quiet intelligence in her gaze. "She's Vortani," Elias whispered. The accompanying file explained that she was considered property under Vortani law, part of a complex system of servitude that humans had long found abhorrent. But by galactic treaty, the Allies had the right to claim her as part of the Empire's defeated assets. Elias scowled. "They expect me to take ownership of her." He shook his head. There was something uncomfortable about it, as if the war's consequences were landing on him in ways he hadn't imagined. This wasn't a medal or a commendation. It was a person, and under human law no one could be owned, but technically that was what the Empire had wanted. When the transport ship docked at the Alliance base on Ceres Station, the transfer was simple and bureaucratic. There were forms, holographic signatures, and legal clauses. Through it all, Elias remained silent. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't look at the officers who assumed he would be proud. Pride felt hollow these days. Finally, he was alone in a small, sparse living quarters. A soft chime announced a visitor. Elias turned to see a tall, graceful figure step into the room. Lyrathal. She moved with a quiet elegance, her gaze steady and unwavering. There was no fear, no visible hostility, only a carefully controlled wariness. She spoke in the galactic standard, the common language of traders, soldiers, and diplomats. "You are Elias Ward?" she asked, her voice calm, tinged with curiosity. "I am," he replied. "And you must be Lyrathal. I received the notice. I wasn't sure how to feel about it." Lyra tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture humans rarely noticed. "I have been informed that my position has changed, that I am now under your authority." Her words carried a strange weight. Authority, she said, but there was no cruelty in her tone. She was merely stating facts as she had always been taught to do. Elias ran a hand through his hair. "Under human law, no one can be owned. You're free to live as you wish. I don't intend to treat you like property, but I need to understand what this all means for both of us." Lyra blinked, surprised. Free. The concept seemed foreign to her. Her people had lived under rigid hierarchies for generations. Obedience was ingrained in every aspect of life. The idea that she could make her own choices, that her actions might be hers alone, was confusing. Elias gestured for her to sit. "Let's start simple. Tell me about yourself, your world, your life before the war." She sat gracefully, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were sharp and perceptive, taking in the room Elia's every small detail. I am Lyrathal of the Vortani, born into a family that served the Empire. Service was expected, obedience required. We did not question orders. We were trained to follow, to serve our rulers, to ensure the Empire's power endured. Elias listened, feeling a deep mix of pity and respect. The Vortani were not evil. They were shaped by a culture built on structure and obedience, and that had been enforced for centuries. Yet here was one who survived not as a warrior but as a witness to her own civilization's flaws. "Do you wish to continue that life?" he asked carefully. "Or would you like a different path?" Lyra hesitated. "A different path is frightening. Freedom is frightening. To choose is to risk error, to risk failure, to risk loss. I have never been asked to choose." Elias nodded, understanding perfectly. Humanity had survived countless trials by choice, by courage, by mistakes, and yet here was someone who had never had that luxury. "Then start small, learn, explore. You are not a tool, not a prize. You are yourself, and I will respect that." For the first time, Lyra's posture softened, though subtly. She looked at Elias, studying him as if trying to read a new language. "Your species is very different. You do not command through fear." "No," he admitted. "Humans are strange. We fight, yes, but we also forgive, we adapt, we grow. Sometimes that makes us stubborn, sometimes brave. Sometimes it gets us killed. But we try to survive and we try to do what's right." Lyra considered this, then asked, almost as if testing the limits of his words, "Will you always protect me? Will you ensure I am not returned to my people?" Elias' gaze hardened. "I will protect you from harm, but I will not chain you, force you, or make choices for you. That's not my way. You will never be returned against your will, that is my promise." The room fell silent. Outside, the station's engines hummed, a low mechanical heartbeat beneath the quiet. For the first time, both human and Vortani felt the weight of the war's aftermath, not in destroyed cities or broken fleets, but in the fragile, untested trust between two beings from entirely different worlds. Over the next few days, Elias tried to learn about Lyra's culture, her history, her language nuances. She, in turn, studied him, not just as a human, but as a representative of a species that had defeated her own. She asked questions about Earth, about the war, about why humans did not conquer everything they could. Elias answered honestly, without embellishment. Humanity had faults, of course, greed, pride, mistakes, but they had survived because of empathy, cooperation, and an unshakable belief in their own potential. And perhaps he realized this was what Lyra needed to see, that humans could be more than warriors. They could be teachers, allies, even friends. A week later, a small crisis brought their fragile relationship into focus. A routine supply shipment was attacked by rogue mercenaries who did not recognize the new treaties. Elias and Lyra worked together to navigate the attack. Lyra's intelligence and quick thinking surprised him. She suggested a course of action that humans might not have considered, and her insights helped them avoid disaster. Elias couldn't help but smile despite the danger. "You're clever," he said. "Not just trained, but truly clever." Lyra allowed herself a small smile, a rare and precious gift. "Perhaps I am learning." And in that moment, Elias realized something important. The war had not ended just because the fighting stopped. The real war was for understanding, for trust, for the courage to change. And humanity, his humanity, had the power to lead by example, to show even those born into chains that freedom, choice, and dignity were worth everything. As the sun set over Ceres Station, Elias and Lyra stood side by side on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and for the first time since the war ended, both felt the possibility of a future that was not dictated by death or conquest. A future that could be shaped by respect, courage, and the quiet, persistent power of humanity. Elias looked at Lyra and nodded. "Tomorrow we start a new journey, not as master and servant, not as victor and vanquished, but as allies. and perhaps one day as friends. Lyra nodded back, her gemstone eyes reflecting the starlight. Then we shall see what humans truly are capable of. And so, in the aftermath of war, two very different beings began a path that would test their courage, their beliefs, and the very definition of freedom. The galaxy had changed. They had changed. And nothing would ever be the same again. The days after the war had been quiet, almost painfully so. Ceres Station, once a hub of military operations, now seemed like a ghost town. Most soldiers had returned home, fleets were docked in silence, and the only sounds were the soft hum of machinery and the occasional clatter of maintenance drones. Captain Elias Ward moved through the station with a sense of unease. Victory had a strange taste. It was supposed to be sweet, but in its place lingered uncertainty. And in the middle of it all was Lyrathal. Lyra had begun exploring her new life cautiously. The idea of freedom was strange to her, almost frightening. On her home world, a Vortani born into servitude had never questioned orders, never imagined a choice beyond obedience. And now, for the first time, she had that choice, though it was a burden as much as it was a gift. Elias watched her closely. He knew freedom could be overwhelming. He had fought to save lives, yes, but saving someone from a system of oppression required more than victory in battle. It required patience, understanding, and guidance. Elias, Lyra said one morning, her voice quiet but steady, I do not know what to do. I am free, yet I feel lost. My entire life, every action I took was dictated. Now nothing is dictated, he nodded. I understand freedom is not easy, you're not used to it. But it is yours entirely. You can take time to learn, to explore. Nobody will force you to do anything. Lyra's eyes flicked toward the station's windows, showing a planet slowly rotating in the distance. I do not even know who I am, Elias. I have never asked. I have never been allowed to. Elias put a hand on her shoulder, careful and reassuring. Then start small. You are not just your past. You can define yourself in ways your people never could. That is the gift humanity can offer, not dominance but choice. The idea settled over Lyra like a weight and a light at the same time. She wanted to accept it, to believe it, yet habits of obedience were strong. Her mind constantly measured actions, second-guessed intentions, and feared missteps. Freedom, she realized, was not simple. It was responsibility, and responsibility was unfamiliar territory. Meanwhile, the galaxy was not as quiet as the station. Across the void, factions watched humanity's post-war actions with interest and suspicion. Many alien species had expected humans to claim Lyra as property, to flaunt victory through dominance. Instead, Elias had rejected that path, honoring not just law but principle. This did not go unnoticed. A delegation from a neighboring system arrived unexpectedly. They represented a coalition of species that had fought alongside the Vortani. Their message was clear. Lyrathal is part of our heritage. You cannot claim her without consequence. Elias met them in the station's tribunal chamber, a large hall designed for negotiation and conflict resolution. He faced their leader, a tall, silver-scaled diplomat named Korath. You misunderstand, Elias said calmly. Lyra is not property by human law. She is free to choose her own path. I do not claim her. I protect her until she decides. Korath's voice was sharp, almost scornful. Your species is naive. In our eyes, she is bound to her people's legacy. By taking her, you disrupt traditions that have lasted for centuries. Do you understand the consequences? I understand perfectly, Elias replied evenly. But humanity does not enforce chains. We believe in choice. We believe in freedom. If she chooses to stay, it is because she wants to, not because law or fear forces her. That is our principle. The diplomats exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected a display of conquest, not morality. Elias stood firm, unwavering. It was a quiet demonstration of human strength. the kind that did not rely on weapons or intimidation, but on values and courage. Back in his quarters, Elias and Lyra discussed the meeting. Lyra was thoughtful, silent for long minutes. "Your people, they are different. I expected you to treat me as the others would. I expected chains." "Humans are not perfect," Elias admitted. "We have fought and failed many times, but we also strive to do what is right. Sometimes that makes others uncomfortable." Lyra's eyes reflected curiosity and doubt. "I have always known obedience. I have never known choice. And now, I do not know what to do. Even standing here, I feel unsure. My people, they would call this weakness." "No," Elias said firmly. "This is strength. It takes courage to face uncertainty, to act without being told. That is why humans survive. That is why we endure." Over the next few days, Lyra began small experiments in autonomy. She decided what she would eat, where she would go, and how she would interact with the station. Every small decision was a step toward independence, but also a challenge. Old habits die slowly, and her mind constantly measured her actions against invisible rules she had grown up with. One afternoon, while walking through the station's gardens, Lyra paused at a small fountain. Water flowed gently, sparkling in the artificial sunlight. She reached out, letting the water slip between her fingers, and smiled faintly. "This is peaceful," she murmured. "I have never noticed peace before. Only duty, only obedience, only fear." Elias joined her, watching her closely. "Peace is something humans fight for, yes. But it is also something we cherish. It is not given, it is chosen and protected." Lyra's gaze met his. "And you choose it every day." "Yes," he said. "Even in war, we choose it. Even in chaos, we try to hold on to it. That is what separates survival from living." Their moment of calm was interrupted by an urgent alert. A distress signal flashed on the station's monitors. A convoy of refugees was trapped in a nearby asteroid field. Pirates had blockaded the area, expecting easy prey among post-war transport vessels. Elias didn't hesitate. "We need to help them," he said. "Grab your gear, you're coming with me." Lyra's pulse quickened. Combat was foreign to her, yet she did not question the order. She followed, alert and observant, moving with grace and precision. Elias noticed how quickly she adapted, how she analyzed the situation without fear or hesitation. The asteroid field was dangerous, with jagged rocks floating between the ships. Pirates attacked without warning, their laser blasts cutting across the void. Elias maneuvered the transport ship expertly, dodging debris and enemy fire. Lyra assisted, monitoring sensors and suggesting optimal flight paths. "Turn starboard by 5 degrees," she said, pointing at the navigation console. "The cluster ahead is denser. It will block their line of fire." Elias followed her advice. The ship twisted gracefully, avoiding destruction. Together, they rescued the stranded convoy, guiding the transport safely to Ceres Station. Afterward, Elias looked at her, a mixture of pride and surprise in his eyes. "You were incredible, not just trained, but intuitive. You saw things I didn't." Lyra's face flushed slightly, a rare expression of emotion. "Perhaps freedom makes the mind sharper. Or perhaps I am learning to think for myself." That night, as the station quieted, Elias and Lyra reflected on the day's events. The galaxy was still dangerous, and many would challenge their choices, but they had proven something important. Humanity's strength was not only in arms, but in wisdom, patience, and courage. "You see, Lyra," Elias said, "freedom is more than an idea. It is action. It is responsibility. It is facing danger and making decisions without someone else telling you what to do. That is what humans endure and what we offer to others." Lyra nodded, absorbing his words. "Then I will try. I will try to learn what it means to choose. I will try to live not as a servant, but as myself." Elias smiled. It was not a perfect smile, not one of relief, but a promise. A promise that humanity could guide, protect, and inspire, even in the aftermath of war. And for Lyra, it was a first step into a new existence. a life where she could define herself, free from chains, free from fear, and free to grow. Outside the station, stars glittered like diamonds, a silent reminder of the galaxy's vastness and the infinite possibilities it held. Two very different beings, human and Vortani, stood on the edge of a new beginning. Their journey was only starting and the weight of the past was still heavy, but together they would face it. For the first time since the war ended, the future felt not like a shadow, but like a light waiting to be claimed. The galaxy never rested, and neither could Elia's. Even as the calm of Ceres Station seemed to settle, tension stirred on the edges of human territory. Word of Lyrathal's presence, and her status as a free individual under human protection, had spread quickly. For many alien factions, it was a provocation. To some, a human refusing to claim ownership over a Vortani was an insult, a challenge to traditions older than any human empire. Elias felt the weight of this reality every time he left his quarters. Rumors whispered through the station's corridors, subtle but persistent. Some officers admired his stance, others questioned it, fearful of provoking interstellar conflict. And Lyra was feeling the pressure in ways Elias could not fully understand. One morning, as the pale light of the station's artificial sun filtered through the observation dome, Lyra approached him. Her expression was uncertain, a mixture of curiosity and fear. "Elias," she said softly, "there are voices. In the corridors, in the data streams, in the market, people speak about me. They do not all speak kindly. Some say I should be returned, that humans are interfering in matters they do not understand." Elias nodded. "I know. Others will always question what they do not understand, but our actions are not about them. They are about what is right. You are free, Lyra, and no one can take that from you unless you allow it." Lyra shook her head, frustration flickering across her delicate features. "Freedom is heavier than I imagined. I am expected to choose, yet every choice feels like a mistake waiting to happen. At home, I knew my place. Now, I do not know my place anywhere." Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That feeling is normal. Freedom is not something learned overnight. It is a journey. And on this journey, mistakes are part of learning. The important thing is that you are the one making your choices, not someone else." Her eyes softened, and for a moment the tension that had haunted her posture seemed to ease. "Perhaps I can try. I can begin to understand what it means to be myself." Just then, the station's alert system blared. Red lights flashed across the hallways, accompanied by a sharp, mechanical tone. Elias' heart sank. External visitors, diplomatic envoys, were approaching the station without warning. And judging by the sensor readings, they were armed with both legal documents and fleets ready to enforce their claims. Elias ushered Lyra into the command center. "Sit tight. This might get complicated. These are not just words. They want leverage, and they believe they have the right to claim you." The view screens flickered to life. On them appeared representatives of the coalition of allied species that had once fought with the Vortani. Their spokesperson was a tall, armored diplomat named Saren, his eyes sharp and cold. "Captain Ward," Saren's voice echoed in the chamber, "Lyrathal belongs to the Vortani heritage. Your interference is unlawful and unacceptable. We demand her immediate return." Elias remained calm, though inside his mind raced. "Lyra is not property. She has the right to choose her path, and under human law she is free. You may not dictate her future." Saren's eyes narrowed. "You overestimate your authority. The galaxy recognizes the Vortani traditions. If you do not comply, there will be consequences." Lyra's gaze shifted nervously from Elias to the screen. "Consequences," she whispered. The concept of political tension, of external forces threatening her autonomy, was terrifying. In her lifetime, no one had ever asked her opinion. Now the consequences of her choices felt overwhelming. Elias knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "You do not have to answer them. You only have to be yourself. I will defend your choice." The diplomat's hologram flickered as Saren continued, outlining legal claims, interstellar customs, and threats of retaliation. To most humans, such a display would seem oppressive, but to Lyra, it was a demonstration of everything she had escaped. Chains of tradition were tightening in real time, yet Elias stood firm, unshaken by intimidation. "Lyra," Elias said gently, "look at me. You are not alone. We will navigate this together. Your choice is yours and yours alone." Hours passed in tense negotiation. Lyra sat quietly, her mind spinning with questions she had never dared to ask before. Could she return to her people? Could she leave humanity behind? Could she live as someone who decides rather than obeys? Every scenario felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Finally, Saren ended the transmission. "You will regret this decision, human. The Vortani do not forgive lightly." The hologram vanished. Lyra exhaled, relief and fear mixing in her chest. They wanted to force me back. They thought you would allow it." Elias shook his head. "Humans do not force. We guide, we teach, and we protect. That is our strength. And you have the power to decide. That scares them because they are used to control." For the first time, Lyra considered the truth in his words. Her fear of freedom had been real, but so was her growing understanding that strength was not measured by chains or obedience. It was measured by courage, by decisions made under uncertainty. "Then, I must choose," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "And my choice will be mine alone." Elias nodded. "Exactly, and no matter what you choose, I will respect it. That is humanity's way, not ownership, not domination, respect." That evening, they walked through the station's gardens. The artificial sunlight cast soft shadows across the plants, and the quiet trickle of fountains offered a rare moment of peace. Lyra moved slowly, carefully examining each plant, each detail. "I am learning," she said quietly. "Learning that my thoughts, my decisions, my actions belong to me. I never knew I could own anything in this way. Not objects, not even myself." "You do," Elias said gently, "and that is something no empire, no law, no tradition can take from you. You are free because you are humans' ally in spirit. Humans fight not only wars, but for the principles that make life worth living." Lyra tilted her head, considering him. "Then, humans are different from other species. You do not need fear to command. You do not need chains to hold power." Elias smiled faintly. "We are stubborn, yes, and we make mistakes often, but we endure because we choose to. Freedom is not easy, Lyra, but it is worth every struggle." Their quiet conversation was interrupted by another transmission, this one from a human liaison stationed on a distant planet. Reports indicated that other factions were watching closely, taking notes, and preparing their own challenges. Elias realized that the political storm surrounding Lyra would not end anytime soon. He turned to her. "This is just the beginning. There will be tests, challenges, and those who do not understand your freedom will try to take it. But every time you face them, remember, you are not defined by chains or traditions. You are defined by your choices, and I will always defend that." Lyra's gemstone eyes reflected determination mixed with anxiety. "Then I will face it. I will learn to choose. And I will not be taken by fear or by force. I will be myself." Elias nodded, proud yet concerned. "That is all I ask. The galaxy may try to teach you otherwise, but you must remember, freedom is more than escape. Freedom is action, responsibility, and courage." The night settled over Ceres Station. Outside, stars shimmered in the endless blackness of space, silent witnesses to the struggles of those below. For Lyra, the journey of choice had begun. For Elias, the challenge was clear: to protect her, to guide her, and to show the galaxy the strength of humanity, not through domination, but through principle. And for the first time since the war ended, both human and Vortani understood that freedom was not given lightly. It was claimed, nurtured, and defended. And in this understanding, the seeds of something greater, trust, respect, and shared courage, were being planted. The Alliance Council chamber was vast and cold, a place built to house the voices of thousands of delegates from dozens of species. Its walls were polished metal, reflecting the muted light of distant stars, and the ceiling stretched high enough that the upper galleries seemed suspended in space itself. Here, matters of diplomacy, law, and interstellar order were decided. And today, Elia's ward and Lyrathal would be at the center of it all. The news of Lyra's status as a free individual under human protection had spread quickly. The Vortani coalition, along with several other species, demanded a hearing. They expected compliance, intimidation, or at least hesitation from the human captain. Elias, however, had made his position clear. Lyra would decide her own future, and humanity would defend that choice. As they entered the chamber, hundreds of delegates turned to watch. Aliens of every shape, color, and form filled the galleries, some whispering among themselves, others observing with sharp, calculating eyes. At the center of the room, the council president, a wise and neutral human named Valen Rios, called the session to order. "Captain Ward," Valen's voice echoed through the chamber, "you have requested this hearing to discuss the status of Lyrathal. You will present your case." Elias stepped forward. He did not raise his voice unnecessarily, nor did he rely on threat or spectacle. He spoke with calm authority, each word chosen carefully. "Members of the council," Elias began, "Lyrathal is no longer bound by the laws of the Vortani Empire. Under human law, no sentient being can be considered property. She has the right to choose her own life, her own actions, and her own destiny. My responsibility is to ensure her freedom and to defend her from anyone who would deny it." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates leaned forward, curious. Others scowled, offended by the defiance of tradition. One of the Vortani envoys, Saren, rose to speak, his tone cold and precise. "You claim to protect her," Saren said, voice echoing against the metal walls, "yet she is a part of our heritage. Your defiance is not only an insult to the Vortani people, but a challenge to centuries of law and custom. Humans have no right to interfere." Elias met his gaze steadily. "Respecting tradition is different from enforcing oppression. Lyra is not property. She is a sentient individual with her own mind, her own choices. To return her against her would be a violation of her rights and a betrayal of every principle humanity stands for." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the statement sinking in. Then Lyra stood. The hall, designed for order and formal speech, fell quieter still. All eyes turned to her. I speak for myself," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I am not a possession. I am not a tool of tradition. I choose my own path. I will live as I decide, not as anyone else dictates. I will not return unless I want to, and my choice is final." A shock ran through the delegates. The Vortani, in particular, were visibly unsettled. For centuries, a Vortani born into service would never speak so boldly, let alone declare freedom against the demands of their own people. Lyra's courage was unprecedented. Saren's eyes narrowed. "You cannot defy your people," he said. "You will bring dishonor to your name, to your lineage." Lyra held her gaze, unwavering. "Honor is not obedience. Honor is acting according to one's conscience, defending what is right and protecting freedom. That is my honor, and I will not relinquish it for fear or tradition." Elias felt a surge of pride. Here was a being shaped by centuries of servitude, standing boldly in the heart of interstellar politics, asserting her autonomy with clarity and courage. Humanity's principles, freedom, responsibility, respect, were not just abstract ideals. They were alive, embodied in this moment. The session continued for hours. Arguments were made, threats were whispered, and alliances subtly shifted in response to Lyra's declaration. Some delegates questioned the wisdom of human law. Others began to wonder if a society that could inspire such courage might indeed be a model for others. Elias and Lyra worked together seamlessly. He handled procedural challenges and political objections, while she answered questions about her life, her understanding of freedom, and her reasons for choosing autonomy. Their collaboration was silent proof of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to teach, protect, and guide without domination. At one point, Saren attempted a last-minute maneuver, citing obscure treaties and invoking the threat of military intervention. Elias, unshaken, responded with careful logic. "You can threaten," he said, voice steady, "but no threat can take away what is earned, what is chosen, what is defended. Humanity does not bow to intimidation. We protect the rights of sentient beings. That is our way." Lyra added, her voice clear and firm, "And that is why I am free. I have not been given freedom by humans. I have earned it with their guidance, with their trust, and with my own courage. I will not surrender it to fear or tradition." The council deliberated late into the artificial night. Outside, the stars glimmered, silent witnesses to a moment that might ripple across the galaxy for generations. Finally, Valen Rio spoke. "Captain Ward Lyrathal," he said, "after careful consideration, the Council acknowledges the human principles presented here. Lyrathal's autonomy is recognized. No delegate may compel her to act against her will. The Council thanks Captain Ward for his dedication to justice and to the ethical treatment of sentient beings." A hush fell over the chamber, followed by quiet murmurs of approval and surprise. Some delegates left, grudging but respectful. Others lingered, contemplating the implications. Humanity had not only defended freedom, they had reshaped expectations, demonstrated moral strength, and inspired others to reconsider long-held traditions. After the session, Elias and Lyra walked along the observation corridor, the galaxy stretching before them like an endless sea of possibilities. "You were incredible," Elias said quietly. "You faced fear, tradition, and expectation, and you stood tall. You showed them what it means to be free." Lyra smiled faintly, exhaustion and relief mixing in her expression. "I had guidance. You did not command me. You did not dictate. You only showed me that I could act for myself. That is why I could stand. That is why I could speak." Elias nodded. "That is the human way. We do not dominate. We protect, we teach, and we inspire. Strength comes not from control but from courage and principle." They spent the next few hours reviewing reports from the session, noting which delegates might challenge them again and which had been influenced by their stance. The political landscape was complicated, but for the first time, Elias felt a sense of hope. Humans could stand firm not only in battle but in ethics. They could lead not by fear but by example. Later, as they gazed out at the stars, Lyra reflected on her journey. The past weeks had been a whirlwind. The war's end, her inheritance, the threats, the choices, and now the formal recognition of her freedom. She realized that true strength was not obedience, nor was it survival. It was the courage to face the unknown, to make decisions when all outcomes were uncertain, and to stand by them with integrity. "I am beginning to understand," Lyra said softly, her eyes fixed on a distant star. "Freedom is not simple. It is not safe. It is responsibility, courage, and the willingness to act according to what is right, even when others oppose it. I have been given a chance to choose, and I will not waste it." Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And you will not. You are humans' ally in spirit, Lyra. You embody the principles we fight for, not with weapons alone, but with wisdom and courage. The galaxy may test you, but you are ready." For a moment, the quiet hum of the station was all that existed. Stars glimmered, casting their pale light across the chamber, reflecting in the windows like distant promises. Together, human and Vortani had faced tradition, intimidation, and fear, and emerged stronger. The galaxy had witnessed the human way, a combination of guidance, respect, and moral courage that could change hearts and minds without a single weapon being fired. And in that moment, Lyra felt it clearly. She was not a possession, not a servant, not a shadow of her people's history. She was herself, and that realization was the beginning of a future that could be shaped by choice, courage, and the unwavering principles of humanity. The Council's decision was more than just recognition of her freedom. It was a message to the galaxy. Humanity did not rule by fear. Humans endured not by conquest alone, but by defending what was just, protecting what was right, and inspiring others to find courage within themselves. As the stars stretched endlessly outside the station, Elias and Lyra knew their journey was far from over. Threats would come, challenges would arise, and the galaxy's politics would continue to shift. But they had proven something fundamental. Freedom, respect, and courage were worth defending, and humanity's way could stand as a beacon for all who sought them. For the first time in weeks, both human and Vortani felt a quiet certainty. The galaxy was vast, filled with danger but also filled with possibility, and together they were ready to face it. The galaxy was slowly recovering from the scars of war. Systems that had been destroyed were being rebuilt, fleets that had fought endlessly were being repaired, and the people who had survived were beginning to hope. On Ceres Station, life moved with a cautious rhythm, but for Elias Ward and Lyrathal, the journey was far from over. After the Alliance Council had recognized Lyra's autonomy, she was no longer bound by chains of tradition or law. Her freedom was official, her choices her own. But freedom, Elias knew, was not a single act. It was a path, a series of decisions that tested courage, wisdom, and morality. Elias, Lyra said one morning as they walked along the observation corridor, I have been thinking. Freedom is heavier than I imagined. To make choices, to stand by them, to face consequences, it is not easy. Elias nodded. No, it is, but it is worth it. That is what makes humans endure. We are tested, we fail, we learn, and we try again. That is how we grow, and that is how we survive. Lyra glanced at him, her violet blue eyes reflecting the distant stars. I am beginning to understand. Not just the principle of freedom, but its power. It is not given lightly, it is claimed, it is defended, and it can inspire others. Elias smiled faintly. Exactly. And your courage has already inspired many. The Council's decision, the reports from other systems, they are talking about your choice, Lyra. You have set a precedent. She looked uncertain. A precedent? Yes, he said. Other species, other leaders, are seeing that chains are not necessary to maintain order. That respect, guidance, and trust can be more effective than fear. You have shown that by standing for yourself. You encourage others to think differently. That is human strength. For weeks, Lyra worked with Elias to help communicate her story. They visited other stations, met with diplomats, and spoke with leaders from different worlds. She told them not as a subject or servant, but as a being who had faced oppression and chosen freedom. Her courage and eloquence were remarkable, particularly considering the life she had led before. You speak with wisdom, one alien delegate commented during a discussion. It is unusual for someone so young to understand freedom in this way. Lyra's eyes glimmered. I have learned from a human who showed me what it means to act for myself. Freedom is not just an idea, it is action. It is responsibility, it is courage, and it is a choice. Elias watched from a distance, proud yet cautious. He knew the galaxy was not without danger. There were still factions who would challenge Lyra's autonomy, who would see her independence as a threat to tradition. But he also knew that they had shown the power of human principles, courage, respect, and moral strength. One evening, while observing the stars, Lyra asked, Elias, what will happen to the Vortani traditions? Will they change? Elias considered carefully. Change is slow and some will resist, but every person who sees freedom and chooses it will carry the idea forward. What humans leave behind is not just law or force, it is example. It is the hope that others can choose courage over fear, respect over oppression. That is how change spreads. Lyra nodded, absorbing the truth in his words. Then I will continue. I will live as an example, not just for myself, but for those who cannot yet see another path. I will be free, and I will show others that freedom can exist. The next weeks brought new challenges. A rogue faction attempted to intercept one of the diplomatic missions they were leading. Their goal was to reclaim Lyra, believing her influence would weaken traditional hierarchies. Elias and Lyra coordinated with human forces and local allies. The encounter was tense but resolved without bloodshed. Lyra's calm, strategic thinking played a key role. She had learned not just to assert herself but to plan, guide, and protect. "You handled that well," Elias said afterward. "You are not just free, you are capable of defending your freedom." Lyra smiled faintly. "I could not have done it alone, but I am learning that freedom also means responsibility. It is not just about being safe, it is about standing for what is right and protecting others who cannot yet stand for themselves." News of their success spread across the sectors. Delegates from other systems began reconsidering ancient practices, questioning whether rigid hierarchies and forced obedience were truly necessary. Lyra's example sparked conversations, debates, and reforms. The galaxy was slowly shifting, one courageous choice at a time. One morning, Elias and Lyra received an unexpected visitor, an older Vortani diplomat who had observed the council session silently. He bowed deeply, his eyes softening with respect. "You have changed the way we see freedom," he said. "Lyrathal's courage and your guidance, Captain Ward, have opened eyes across our worlds. There may still be resistance, but seeds of change have been planted. You have done something remarkable." Elias inclined his head. "We only did what was right. Strength is not about control. It is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves and showing others the value of freedom." The diplomat smiled. "And that, human, is why your species endures. You teach not by fear, but by example. You leave a legacy that lasts longer than fleets or weapons. You leave hope." Lyra watched the diplomat depart, a sense of pride and responsibility settling over her. She realized that her life had transformed completely. No longer was she bound by chains, tradition, or expectation. She was herself, capable of choice, courage, and influence. As the weeks turned to months, Lyra and Elias continued their work, traveling across recovering systems, helping to mediate disputes, and demonstrating the power of moral courage and freedom. Wherever they went, their presence inspired hope, their actions encouraged change, and their example challenged the galaxy to reconsider outdated hierarchies. One evening, after a long day of diplomatic meetings, they returned to Ceres Station. The observation deck was quiet, the stars stretching endlessly before them. Lyra stood at the edge, her gaze fixed on a distant constellation, and spoke softly. "Elias, I never imagined this life. I feared freedom, yet now I understand it is the greatest gift. I will continue to choose to act and to protect what is right, not just for myself, but for others who cannot yet act for themselves." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have grown beyond anyone's expectations. Your courage shows what humans have always believed, that choice, responsibility, and respect are more powerful than any chain, and that is what we leave behind." Lyra turned to him, a quiet smile on her lips. "Then our journey is only beginning. We will face challenges and the galaxy will test us, but we have shown that freedom can endure and that courage can inspire change." Elias nodded. "Yes, humanity does not conquer through fear, we endure through principle. And those who follow our example, like you, Lyra, will help the galaxy survive not by domination but by wisdom, respect, and courage." Together they stood in silence, gazing at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with uncertainty, but also with infinite possibility. For the first time since the war, both human and Vortani felt a sense of clarity and hope. Lyra had claimed her freedom, not given or inherited, but earned through courage and choice. Elias had demonstrated the enduring power of humanity, not through force, but through principle. And the galaxy had taken notice. The stars beyond Ceres Station were more than distant lights. They were reminders that the future was unwritten, that courage and wisdom could change the course of civilizations, and that even in the aftermath of war, hope could endure. As they prepared for their next mission, Lyra took a deep breath. "I am ready," she said, "to live, to choose, to act, and to inspire. I will not be afraid of freedom anymore." Elias smiled, feeling the weight of the journey they had undertaken together. And that, Lyra, is what humans leave behind. Not weapons, not power, but the courage to act rightly, the wisdom to respect choice, and the hope that others will follow. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges, wonders, and possibilities. And together, human and Vortani would face them, not as master and servant, not as victor and vanquished, but as allies, friends, and symbols of the enduring strength of freedom. In the aftermath of war, they had discovered something greater than victory: the power of choice, the courage to act, and the enduring legacy of humanity's principles. And that legacy, they knew, would ripple across the stars for generations to come.